We're sitting here in the Bumblebee Chapel to go over the only build guides you need for Phase 3 of Season of Discovery for Paladin tanks. The thing that's most exciting about this phase is there's many different combinations that you can go over, but today we're going to talk about 3 that interest me the most in Phase 3 of Season of Discovery. After we go over the talents, we'll talk about some combination of runes that you can use to get the gameplay that you like the most. But I want to stress there's many viable builds and combinations this phase, which makes it all the more exciting. We're going to start out with our Deep Prot build, where we're going to stick with the main talents that we know and love. However, we are going to have to sacrifice Holy Shield in order to come over and get Consecration from the Holy Tree. We're going to be taking 5 points in Redoubt, 5 points in Toughness, 3 points in Precision, Blessing of Kings. As we know, it's not really needed, but it's still good if you don't have a hunter around. 3 points in Shield Specialization, 5 points in Reckoning. We're taking Blessing of Sanctuary, of course, and One-Handed Weapon Specialization. I go over these talents more in my last build guide video for Phase 2, so if you're interested in finding out why we're taking them, go ahead and check out that video. Because we're sacrificing Holy Shield, we're going over to the Holy Tree to get Divine Strength, Improved Seal of Righteousness to help with our Seal of Martyr, and Consecration, which is going to greatly help our threat, especially with some of the rune combinations you can use. This build, I believe, is going to give you the most damage reduction out of any of the other builds that you can choose, so I recommend it for early on in the phase when your group is getting used to the new raid and you need to make sure you're taking the least amount of damage possible to make your life easier for the healers, and threat this phase is not going to be an issue. We'll go over more on that later. Coming to the next build, it's a hybrid that goes into all 3 talent trees. We're going to do the same with Holy by going and grabbing Consecration. Then we're going to go down into the Prot tree far enough to get Shield Specialization so we make sure that we're getting the most out of our block value. And then we're going into the Retribution tree to get 5 points in Deflection. We're also going to take 3 points in Vindication, so it'll help reduce the damage that the bosses are doing, which will help out early on in the phase. This leaves us with 4 points that you can put really wherever you want. If you want to get extra critical strike, you can put it in Conviction. If you want Seal of Command, you can take that. If you'd like to get Improved Righteous Fury, you can get that. These points are really yours to choose. The main things we want are Consecration, Shield Specialization, and Deflection. This next build, I think, is going to be the best boss tanking build this phase. Depending on if you have a Rep Paladin in your group, these talents may change. However, you want to roughly do something along the lines of 5 points in Benediction, 5 points in Deflection, so you're taking less damage because if you're parrying, you're not taking damage. 2 points in Improved Judgment, 3 points in Improved Vindication, because if the boss has less stats, you're taking less damage. And very importantly, Conviction. This is going to be making your Hammer of Righteous absolutely insane doing crit damage, as you can see in this gameplay right here. Next, we're going to go to the Prot tree, and we're putting 5 points in Redoubt, 5 points in Toughness, 3 points in Precision, and 3 points in Shield Specialization. The last 5 points, we're going to Holy, and we're putting it in Divine Strength. With this build, you're hardly giving up any damage reduction. The only thing you're losing out on is Blessing of Sanctuary, but in a boss fight, with the amount of damage they're hitting you with, it might not be as valuable as being able to parry an attack, which is why we want to go into Retribution, and we're going to find extra damage, which means extra threat, through our Hammer of Righteous. Next, we're going to be talking about the important runes for tanking paladins that came out in Phase 3, starting with Improved Sanctuary. If you take Blessing of Sanctuary, this is a rune that you want to consider because it's going to reduce the damage that you take and increase the damage that you do every time you block. This rune will pair up very nicely with Aegis because Aegis increases your block value, which means it's going to be doing even more damage. Wrath is another rune that you should consider running because it's going to allow your Consecration to critical strike, which is going to help AoE threat. It's also going to help single target threat. So you're less reliant on running Art of War, which opens up possibilities to run Guarded by the Light so you can have infinite mana, or Sacred Shield so you can help take less damage. Those are the two primary runes that I recommend trying out for your Helm slot. Moving on to your wrist slot, Hammer of Righteous is an absolute must. Warlocks get their Immolation Aura, which essentially puts sticky paper on them for mobs, so if you want to be competing with that, you'll need Hammer of Righteous. Not only does it help the threat, it does a crazy amount of damage. This is really the only rune that I would recommend running on your wrist because it's so overpowered that you would be doing yourself a disservice by not running. These are the primary new runes in Phase 3 that are going to help Paladin tanks the most. I recommend trying different combinations, especially the improved Blessing of Sanctuary and Aegis combination. To wrap things up here, there's many combinations and builds that you can use in Phase 3. I'm sure there's going to be a nerd that runs the math calculations to find out exactly which one is min-maxing in a 20-year-old game. However, don't lose sight of the fact that you can play multiple builds, be viable, and complete the hardest content in Phase 3 as long as you're being a good player. I put my stamp of approval on any of these builds. This has been my follow-up guide for Phase 3. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, subscribe to the channel, like the video, do all that other stuff that people say in these things, and we'll see you for the next one.